What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some 2026 impressions of Watch Dogs 2, a game which released a decade ago. And honestly, does it show? Which is, very intentionally actually, why I decided to go ahead and make this video. My initial plan was to just review the game and then drop that review in full and not make this video, but I've had such a time getting this game to actually work and run, and then grabbing all the multiplayer stuff that is a bit of a nightmare, that I decided to go ahead and talk about it. Now, to give you the full background, I've 100%'d this game already. It is done. Really, all I've got to do is run through the story and, kind of mess around a little bit, make the actual review, and then it's good to go. The 100% has already happened. Most of that recently here was actually the multiplayer achievements, which I had not done previously because I actually played this game when it released in 2016, which is when I did all the base game stuff. Last year, early 2025, Ubisoft added Steam achievements to a bunch of their old titles, Watch Dogs 1 and 2 included, and so I decided to go back and review them, as I had not covered them on the channel, but I had really enjoyed them when I played them for the most part, outside of Legion, which I never touched. So obviously this game was next up on my list, and that's where things got a little strange. Now, most of the achievements and stuff, they sync whenever you load up a Ubisoft game, so all my old progress transferred instantly, and then I spent the last couple days just clearing out the things I did not yet have. And yet, just in doing that, I ran into a truckload of problems, honestly, which is obviously going to feature into the review itself. So, I'll start by saying this. As somebody who reviews a lot of older games, usually judging by about how old they are, you can roughly tell how much of an annoyance it is going to be to get those games working the way they need to work in order for you to cover them. More often than not, the stuff that is going to give you problems is stuff that is like pre-2010. From like 2010 to about 2013, 2014, it's hit or miss. Some of them run really well without any problem at all. Other games in that range will give you all sorts of issues. So when I went to fire up Watch Dogs 2 from 2016, I was not expecting all of the issues that I got. For starters, I initially couldn't play the game at all because when you went to fire it up, it would just give you a black screen that did absolutely nothing. And in order to fix that, I had to manually go into the file system and find the game settings folder and manually force the game into windowed mode, as the black screen would play with all of the game sounds and stuff, so I knew it was running. But by forcing it into Windows mode, I was able to get everything else sorted out. But eventually, I got it sorted out and got it to, actually load into the title screen properly. Then I encountered large issue number 2, which I was not able to immediately fix for a different reason, but it turns out that Watch Dogs 2 on 40 and 50 series GPUs from NVIDIA has an insane flickering problem. Like, the screen will just flicker and there's nothing you can do about it, at least on an in-game level. There is actually a fix for this, and it's to download the NVIDIA Profile Inspector and basically just modify the driver a little bit for when it plays Watch Dogs 2, and that will mostly resolve the flickering, but not always. It will still happen sometimes, but it happens dramatically less, and I would say makes the game a little more playable as a result. The issue with that fix, however, is that while this will still let you participate in multiplayer for the most part, it will not let you participate in the showdown mode, the actual PvP version of the multiplayer that forces you into lobbies and stuff. If you have this fix applied and you go to load into a showdown match, it will just crash your game. Meaning that if you want to get the multiplayer stuff, you have to wait to do that. So I decided to go ahead and knock out the multiplayer stuff first, which is done, thankfully. But there were still plenty of problems ahead, not least of which the fact that multiplayer achievements are hard to get when no one's really playing the multiplayer anymore. Like, for starters, showdown mode sometimes just crashes your game regardless. But very broadly speaking, I hate multiplayer achievements in a primarily single-player game. It's just not a good time, and I don't like when they are included. And for stuff like what happened with Watch Dogs 2 is exactly why. Now you have these achievements that are really hard to get because nobody's playing this game that much anymore. Thankfully, there are enough helpful people over on the Steam forums and stuff, for example, that you can still get it done, and some of them can actually be completed solo, so it's not impossible by any means. Most of them are relatively trivial. There is one in particular that is a bit of a nightmare though, and it is called It's the Final Showdown. You essentially just have to win 4 games of the game's PvP multiplayer in a row in order to get the maximum streak bonus for it. Because of the reduced player numbers and everything, really the only reliable way to get this is to team up with other people and sort of force the limited matchmaking to get you into a group and then let each other win until you get it. Like I said, annoying, but it's all done. great, we can move on, except not really, because there were some other problems as well. So another problem you can run into is that sometimes the game will just randomly crash as the result of the old NVIDIA Ansel feature, and not the feature itself, but rather the file that controls it within the game's file seems to occasionally get corrupted for some reason, so you can go ahead and go into the files again and delete that Ansel folder, which seems to solve that problem. There's also the fact that randomly the game will just have a really low FPS, and when you combine all of that together, kind of bizarrely in my opinion, Watch Dogs 2, being 10 years old, I think should run better than it does over on PC. This is kind of ridiculous, actually. And I basically wanted to make this video to complain about it. And that's especially frustrating because what I actually remember of Watch Dogs 2 is that it is a very fun gameplay experience. The story and characters didn't resonate with me quite as much as the original games did, as its sort of neo-noir approach was a little more interesting to me personally. Though I think with the move from Chicago to San Francisco, the more, let's say, upbeat tone here I think probably makes a little more sense. But regardless of how you feel about the story or the characters, the gameplay from the original was much improved. We saw the addition of things like the new RC jumper, which they messed around with a little bit in the DLC for the first game. We also got the quadcopter this time around, which is a drone you can fly around. You can use to activate and change up all your hacking and everything. The hacking itself is a little more streamlined in terms of the UI. Rather than easily profiling everybody immediately, you actually have to press a button to do that, which is a small change that simultaneously makes you feel a little less connected to the world, but also does free up a little more of the screen, and that's probably going to be needed because there is a lot of stuff on screen here yet still. But let's talk a little more specifically. So I said the story of this one isn't quite my thing in comparison to the first one, and I think it's probably a little more complicated than that. I actually do enjoy the bigger themes of the story here. I think both this one and the original game really have something to say in terms of course, things like digital surveillance and how that just keeps creeping up on people, and as time marches on, that is only becoming more and more prevalent in the modern day. This game has side quests of you finding individuals who have been picked up by the city operating system that they have going in all the cities, which is only expanded despite everything that happened in the first game. But you see that operating system via all of its data, making snap judgments about random people that you can bump into for side quests, and then it just destroys their entire life by jacking up all of their premiums and effectively bankrupting them. In fact, pretty often the game makes a point of delving into the ways things like this could just crush somebody under the weight of a society built around this information gathering. And again, obviously very topical even today. But the part of it that never really landed for me was really down to like the presentation of those things. It has a very sort of carefree, wow, so random type of tone to some of that storytelling that always just kind of was a little too much of a juxtaposition for my tastes. Outside of just those things, there were a handful of other gameplay systems that saw some touch-ups between 1 and 2 as well. I've already mentioned stuff like the gadgets and RC cars. They also bring in a 3D printer that allows you to print a bunch of weaponry, which is your primary way of acquiring guns. I personally think there is a much better variety and depth to the various weapon systems themselves. The first game, for instance, got dramatically easier the second you got your hands on a silenced weapon. Whereas here in 2, you can get silenced weapons pretty much straight away, but it can be a little more difficult in general to maintain stealth, which I think actively encourages you to use all the gadgets and things at your disposal. They also made changes to the way you acquire progression, so this time around you have to gather up research, both regular and key data, in fact, to research your upgrades, though much of those are very similar to what we saw in the first game, basically giving you more and more access to the city's operating system, allowing you to hack more stuff. But seeing all the puzzles and stuff they set up with things like the RC jumper, how they got the quadcopter involved, knowing when to run up personally versus to do things at range with those gadgets, adds an element of gameplay that the first game just kind of lacked that makes this one feel a little more alive. And then there's the city itself. So the game takes place in San Francisco, as I mentioned. And believe it or not, I think Ubisoft actually did a really good job with this game of not kind of making it a super checklisty experience. There aren't towers you go around to find to then hack into that then show you everything to do in the vicinity, but rather you either have to get really, really close to those things in your regular vision, or you can activate this sort of like network cloud type of thing that will highlight anything close to you and show you the things you could hack, like side quests, research points, money, that kind of thing. And if you approach that kind of honestly, you can get a little more pulled into all of the little details they put throughout the city, which there's a surprising amount of. But to start wrapping this up, basically, while much of the gameplay and core experience of what I remembered from Watch Dogs 2 is still there, with time it has unfortunately been buried behind a lot of problems. And given that Ubisoft is, even just as of a few days ago, responding to negative reviews on this game, over on its Steam page with incredibly basic boilerplate responses to tech problems like the flickering issue that are frankly not going to work. You can do everything they said to do and it is not going to fix that issue because what they're suggesting just isn't the core issue. I'm not really expecting those problems to get fixed as time marches on. If anything, I think this game is likely only ever going to get more and more difficult to play until it fades away into nothing, if what we've seen so far is anything to go by. So while this has honestly been nothing but problems so far, I am looking forward to making this review and kind of just, I guess, archiving my own thoughts and opinions on it before it gets to a state where it's nigh unplayable, which hopefully should only take a couple days. As I mentioned, the 100% part is already finished and I just have to play through the story and make the video. So I realistically have it down to the easy part already, and you'll likely see that before the end of the week, I would imagine. But for today, that is pretty much going to do it. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear what you think about this, or Legion, actually. When I get to Legion, which is obviously going to be after this, that will be the first time I'm playing that one, so that'll be a new experience for me. But either way, let me know how you feel about all these down in the comment section below. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.